Atari's Business Journey by Anna, Reeve, Alan, Nick, Valeria, and Carla. Table of Context: the early years in founding, Atari's peak, the crash and decline, struggle for relevance, licensing and brand shift, bankruptcy and rebirth attempt.
Atari was once known as the fastest growing company in the history of the United States. A company that in only 3 years went from an annual revenue of $75 million all the way to $2 billion. Atari is most well known during its early days as the company that produced the first consumer available arcade game. Although it did not sell well in the American market, Atari later went on to release Pong in 1972, one of the first commercially successful arcade games. In 1977, Atari released the Atari 2600, also originally called the Atari VCS or Video Computer System, a home video game console that revolutionized gaming by being the first easily accessible and relatively cheap gaming console. This sparked the interest of many other companies like Sega and Nintendo, which followed the trend soon after with consoles such as the NES or Nintendo Entertainment System and the Sega Genesis. The Atari 2600 was also one of the first early consoles to popularize interchangeable game cartridges, which allowed users to play different games on the same console. This helped Atari sell many consoles in the market at the time. In 1976, Atari was sold to Warner Communications for $28 million. With Warner's financial support, Atari quickly grew into one of the fastest growing companies in the world. By 1982, Atari was still riding high, but cracks had started to show. The company overproduced games, notably the infamous E.T. extraterrestrial.
Atari's golden age was in the late 1970s and early 1980s, when the company became a major leader in the video game industry. It started with the release of Pong in 1972, the first successful arcade game. Atari then made more hit games like Space Invaders and Asteroids, which helped video games become popular. In 1977, Atari released an Atari 2600, console that allowed players to use different game cartridges, which was a big innovation. 2600 made a huge success, making Atari a household name. During the time, Atari was the top of the gaming world. However, this golden period ended in the early 1980s due to factors like market oversaturation and poor quality games.
Atari's downfall began in the early 1980s. After the video game crash of 1983, which damaged the company significantly. Atari failed to adapt to changing technology and consumer preferences. Poor management decisions, including a rushed release date of Atari 2600 successor, the 5200, and extraterrestrial, in other words, E.T., led to major financial losses. By the mid-1980s, Atari changed ownership multiple times, which by 1984, the company split into separate divisions. The brand's once dominant position in the gaming industry declined as new competitors like Nintendo and Sega rose to prominence, leaving Atari struggling to recover. Despite attempts to innovate, including Atari Jaguar in 1993, the company couldn't recover and eventually crashed.
After the 1983 crash, Atari struggled to regain its relevance in a fast-evolving gaming market dominated by new competitors. Under the leadership of Jack Trammell, the company shifted focus to home computing, introducing the Atari ST series of personal computers to compete with IBM and Apple. Although the Atari ST found success with niche audiences, it struggled against the popularity of more powerful PCs. Atari made attempts to return to the console market, first with the Atari 7800 in 1986, which failed to make a major impact against the Nintendo Entertainment System. In 1989, Atari released the Atari Lynx, a handheld console with advanced color graphics, but it was overshadowed by Nintendo's Game Boy due to the latter's battery life and game library. Atari's last major attempt with the Atari Jaguar in 1993, marketed as the first 64-bit console. However, it struggled from third-party support and limited games, and couldn't compete with the Sega and Sony's emerging system. Ultimately, Atari ceased hardware production in 1996 as it continued to lose market share, unable to keep up with the industry leaders or capture mainstream consumer interest.
Once a leader in the gaming business, Atari found it difficult to adjust to shifting consumer needs and technological advancements. Atari tried to expand into home computers and license its name and games to other platforms following its early success with arcade games and consoles. These efforts, however, were afflicted by poor quality and rushed releases that damaged its reputation. In the 1980s, the company separated its concentration between arcade games and consumer electronics, resulting in a confusing brand identity. Because it licensed classic games and remakes to profit from its past rather than from innovation, Atari's brand became linked to recollection in the 1990s and early 2000s. Atari's importance has been restored with new efforts like the Atari VCS system and blockchain experiments, but these efforts are still limited. In the end, Atari's brand transitioned from being an innovator to a vintage icon, supported more by licensing and nostalgia than by innovative technological advancements.
Bankruptcy and rebirth attempt, losing more than $500 million. Atari would overproduce games, causing them to lose more money than profit, therefore contributing to the video game market crash. Bankruptcy. In 2013, Atari's USA branch finally files for bankruptcy. This separates itself from the French parent company since it has been lost since 1999. The comeback. Atari released the Atari VCS in 2021, another microconsole paying tribute to the original Atari 2600. Final result. The Atari VCS resulted in another failure since it was still underperforming other consoles, making them lose sales. Atari, a legacy built on innovation, disrupted by challenges, and remembered as a spark that lit the gaming world. Thank you.